Hello everyone and welcome to another Randomised Gaming video. My name is Random Gamer Riven, the editor of Randomised Gaming, and in today's video we are going to be taking a double look at the two recently released Cotton games on PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. In fact, they've had a whole raft of Cotton games. You've had the recent remake release, and there's been Cotton 2 and Cotton Boomerang have also been re-released as well. But in today's video I'm going to be looking at two Cotton games that were originally released in 1994. One was released on the Super Nintendo, and that was Cotton 100% Marchen Adventure, and the second is the iconic Panorama Cotton, released on the Sega Mega Drive. Now, if you're a Cotton fan, you're going to be buzzing at that announcement, as both these Cotton games have never been released outside of Japan before. So it's great to see these two classic games from the series finally get released in the West, that's America and Europe. But before I say anything more, I need to make a quick disclosure that we were kindly provided review copies of both games by a company called PR Hound, and I just need to make you, the viewer, aware of that, as we were provided copies for free. And this can fall under endorsement rules, so do be aware of that. Although I am free to say what I want about this review, but I need to make you know, and I'll be clicking that little YouTube box that says this is an endorsement, a sponsored video, etc., because we were supplied review codes of both games for free. Now, the first game I want to talk about is Panorama Cotton, but I should just give a warning. I've edited this video to avoid any sort of photosynthesis, but do be aware there may be flashing imagery that I do not recommend if you have any sort of things like epilepsy you watch this video any further. But I will be brutally honest, Panorama Cotton has a lot of flashing effects, particularly in the intro, which has a very crazy scene where you see Cotton flashing blue, red and yellow. That is not epilepsy friendly, that sequence. So yeah, this game does really need an epilepsy warning. That's one thing I will point out. It does have some very flashy effects, some of which I know that red and blue flashing is the key catalyst for triggering sort of epileptic seizures. So that's something this game doesn't mention, but it's there in the opening intro, and I was quite surprised. I was like, oh wow, that's quite a heavy flashing effect. They probably should just mention it. So I'm just going to mention that in this video, just as a precautionary warning, but I won't be showing that effect in this video. Now, Panorama Cotton is a really interesting game because it is probably one of the most technically impressive games released on the Sega Mega Drive. If you've never seen it, it is basically like Space Harrier, but it uses some phenomenal effects, the way it achieves the scaling, the zooming, the fact you can go in between different branching routes. It really is a really incredible. It feels literally like you're flying around on a broomstick in a arcade Star Fox style shooter, and it is fantastic, and it is hugely impressive. It was originally released in '94, and at the time it's basically one of those games you look at this thinking, wow, you're surprised this was done on the Mega Drive. It's hugely visually impressive with all the effects. It is just a phenomenal game. Sadly, Panorama Cotton was a game. Success, who did the Cotton games, I'm going to be brutally honest, were not very good at getting their games released outside of Japan. And Panorama Cotton released at the worst possible time for the Mega Drive. It released in sort of late '94, when the Mega Drive really was headed into the death nails. Now, although the Mega Drive did have games released on it a few years later, if you know the history of the Mega Drive, it was doing extremely poorly in Japan from sort of mid-90s. So 94 was a point where it was pretty much at death's door, and as a result, Panorama Cotton had a pretty limited release and didn't sell that well, along with pretty much all the other late life Mega Drive games. Like there's the Pingu game, Alien Soldier and Comic Zone didn't do well at all in Japan either, and a few other. Basically all the late life Mega Drive games had very, very limited runs because the Mega Drive was basically completely outgunned by the Super Nintendo in Japan. So as a result, barely anyone got to ever play Panorama Cotton, which is really sad. On top of that, it never got a Western release, so I don't know why Success never ported it. They should have done it. It would probably sold a lot better in the Western markets, but it never did. So it remained a really quirky Japanese import, and the price actually went up pretty quickly, pretty early on. I used to buy import games as far back as sort of the early 2000s. And even then, it was very expensive to buy. Panorama Cotton, even more expensive now, sadly. So it's actually brilliant that this game has finally got a re-release. And the minute you play it, it's just a phenomenal sort of zooming, shooting, Space Harrier style shooter. It is a really, really good game. There's not much to say about it really in terms of the gameplay, because it's basically straightforward. You can adjust your speed, you got the magic spells from the other Cotton games, and you have a shoot button. And the shoot function originally worked that you press it, it would slow down as you shot, so you had to keep repressing it. But this version does have a mode where you can keep the rapid fire on constantly, which is quite interesting. It's probably a design feature. It's a really weird design feature. You thought the shots would rev up as you held down the trigger, not rev down, but originally they rev down. And it is a hugely impressive visually game. This is also the first time I've really actually sat down and played Panorama Cotton, and so I've seen enough of the game in the past. I knew what I was going to expect visually, and it is, once you see it visually, you just think, wow, how did they do this on the Mega Drive? It is a huge kudos to the team at Success who did this. It is just visually, I would actually say this is probably for me the most technically impressive game on the Sega Mega Drive. So yeah, I mean, this is it just looks and plays phenomenally. That said, all this technical wizardry does come at a slight cost. It's a very short shooter. You can beat it pretty quickly, although you do have a limited number of continues, and the first couple of times there are a few tricky parts I noticed when playing through, so you have to learn the stages. But the fact you have multiple routes on every stage does mean there's some replay value with changing the way you go. So it's just crazy the way you can fly around. It feels like you're flying, and it's actually, in many ways, it's more impressive than even, say, something like Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, because you can go through different routes at points. As I said, you got the selection, so that really did impress me. I think musically and audio wise, it's a bit more run of the mill in that respect. The music's nice enough, and you get quite a long opening intro as well, which gives you the backstory with some nice cutscenes, as I mentioned at the start. That's nice to see. I was actually surprised how long the opening intro is, but it is just a really good shooter. And you know, if you like games like Space Harrier, you're going to like this. It's just really well made. The speed is actually quite interesting because you can slow down or speed up how fast you move. Admittedly, I found generally going for the slower speeds better. So you could speed up to avoid things or slow down. There are bits where it's worth speeding up for, but generally I'd say for the shooting sections it's worth keeping to the slow speed. It's so that way you're moving slower through the stage, so you get more time to react. The faster you move, you get less time to react, but it's helpful to shoot over a few things if you're moving faster. But yeah, there's some really impressive effects, and you do have to keep your eyes on the ball. Just literally lots of things will be flying at you trying to hurt Cotton and Steel as you play. As always, each stage has a boss battle, and of course there's the tea collection section at the end of pretty much every Cotton game. And as always, if you manage to avoid the aim of the tea collection section is to actually not collect a single teacup, and you get a massive secret bonus if you do. But overall, this is just a hugely impressive looking and playing Mega Drive game, and it is really good. Now, the other game is the Super Nintendo one. This did actually get a release on the PlayStation 1 a few years later, and it was literally just a straight port. It may even been a sort of emulated version of the SNES one. But other than that, Cotton 100% Marchen Adventure is pretty much in the same boat as Panoramic Cotton. It never left Japan, and these days it's quite expensive to buy. It's not as expensive because they've had multiple releases, but it's still quite expensive to buy on Super Nintendo if you want one. Now, there are some Cotton fans who I know don't particularly like this one. I think that's a bit unjustified. It's not quite as impressive as the X68 T1000 version of the original Cotton, but that's to be expected. That is a much more powerful home console, and the arcades in the 90s were also much more powerful than Super Nintendo. But I was still actually really quite enjoying this one. It's quite cute. The one slight downside I did notice is that your super shots are very overpowered in this, so you can literally blow away the bosses in a single use of them, which is quite interesting if you deploy them correctly with the frame dragon. But it's very much a traditional shooter game, and it's a bit more leisurely paced. There's a lot less going on screen here than in Panorama Cotton, and this is quite a different feel to it as well. This is, if you like the original Cotton, you may not necessarily like Panorama Cotton. In itself got its own sequel in the form of Rainbow Cotton on Dreamcast, which hopefully we might see a re-release as well, but I haven't seen anything on a Rainbow Cotton release just yet. But if you're listening to this, ININ Games and Strictly Games and Ratalaika Games, please do look at getting Rainbow Cotton, and Success as well, please do look at getting Rainbow Cotton released. But yeah, Marchen Adventure Cotton 100% really is, it's a very quirky little 2D shooter. I really like the SNES 2D visuals. I actually quite like the music as well. I think I kind of preferred the music in this one to Panorama Cotton, but it is a very nice looking 2D SNES game, and it's quite, there aren't that many shooters on SNES, so this is quite a quirky one. This one's got a very, very cutesy visual style. There's a certain, well, they're really bright and colourful. The one other thing I'd say about Panoramic Cotton is the colour palette's a bit duller in comparison. This is a really vibrant colour palette, but I suppose that's partly due to the hardware differences, because the Mega Drive has had a lower colour palette than the Super Nintendo. But this got lots of bright, beautiful colours, some really nice stages. Again, you're going to got another quirky story. Both games have really quirky stories, and both games sort of continuation of the Cotton series, with Silk having to enlist Cotton to help save the day every time. Cotton being a slightly unwilling protagonist to save it, but she's ready there to help. But yeah, Cotton Marchen Adventure is also a really nice sort of little game. It's certainly a lot more relaxed. It's not that hard either. I mean, I was able to progress through it pretty quickly. I haven't actually finished either games yet. I've not spent quite enough time to finish them both, but they don't take long. Although both games will take a little bit of practice, you do have a limited number of continues to finish them, but neither game's that long, so it won't take you too long. Like Cotton Reboot, that we saw, the wonderful reboot I reviewed a few volumes of Now Playing series. Nice to see these two games getting a re-release. It would be nice to actually see these games get proper remakes as well, but for now, I mean, certainly Cotton 100% could probably do with more enemies. It's quite, the stages are quite short. It's much more shorter than the original Cotton, but it's still a very nice, well presented game, and for a SNES game it's quite enjoyable as a shooter, because you didn't get that many shooters on the SNES. But yes, both games are very enjoyable. Again, it's actually quite nice to play some SNES and Mega Drive games that I've never actually owned or really played before. They are both getting reissues by Strictly Limited Games as well, so if the digital version is being done by ININ Games and the retail ones are being done by Strictly Limited Games. I believe they're both part of the same parent company, and the digital versions, which were the versions we reviewed, are $12.99 to buy here in the UK. Admittedly, I would have preferred the price around $9.99, because they are slightly more expensive than the Saturn, Cotton 2 and Cotton Boomerang, and you get less content in these two games. The other thing is, both these games are bare bones emulation. Now, here's a few negative points, and I will be honest, I'm going to be a bit harsher on this than I was Grey Lancer, because these are all done by Ratalaika Games, these sort of emulated ones, and then they're being published by ININ and Strictly, but they need to really start upping the game and fixing bugs. Some of the bugs that they've had in some of the previous versions have carried over, because I think they've rushed out the emulator and not updated it properly. Now, Panorama Cotton had a patch pretty quickly when it released, because it was actually totally broken when it initially went up. And this was after it actually been released for sale. There was an issue. I actually had it and I played it, and I was wondering why I was taking damage, because I hadn't really played the original game, and it turns out there was a bug where the emulation wasn't being done properly and a number of sprites were missing. They have now patched that, but that bug should never have been allowed. So shame on Sony for even passing that. And I will say this to ININ Games and Ratalaika Games, those type of bugs really do hurt your professionality as developers. They should not be going out. I mean, I've worked in scenarios where we've had those tight deadlines, but you can't put out games with game-breaking bugs. But literally, I had it myself. You're flying through the second stage and you could not see any of the enemies at the start, and that's just unforgivable. The other thing is they've not included anything like the manuals, and there's no instructions as well for either games, which is a bit disappointing. So they need to look at actually scanning in the original manuals and content, or at least writing it up and try and getting some of the original up. But yeah, there's no instructions, so any of the sort of more advanced features, I mean, I don't think there's any sort of major control features, but some games do have them, and yeah, you're missing any of that. So yeah, they do need to start looking at including manuals. I don't mind them for things like the Grey Lancer, which was priced at just over £5, but seeing as this is $12.99, they really should be including manuals and instructions for both the games. So that's one thing I will say. The other issue I've seen is that all these games have the same sort of features, the resolutions, etc. Now, I was hoping Panorama Cotton would have a sort of scaled up true scale. It doesn't have that. You get true scale. You then get a weirdly partly stretched one that's not been scaled up to sort of a true scale. So it's more overstretched, and then you get a full widescreen. The options in Marchen Adventure Cotton 100% are a bit limited visually. There are supposed to be 4 visual options. None of them currently work. So if you're looking at this needs to be patched strictly. ININ, this needs to be patched. This is not good. That's disappointing. I think both these games have been pushed out to market very quickly. I mean, they're nice releases, and as I said, there are some additional features. You've got the rewind functions as you've had in the other games that they've been doing. You've got the save states as well, which are nice, but they just need to make sure they're not putting them out with slightly broken bugs. So it's disappointing that currently Panorama Cotton, they've addressed the sprite issue, which is great, but the screen options are still broken as of the time of recording this video for Cotton 100%. Hopefully they'll be fixed pretty shortly, especially seeing as I'll be making a mention of it to them as well myself. They do need to get that fixed. However, they may also be waiting for the English patch, which is supposedly coming. So right now you only get the original Japanese version, which is kind of what I expected. And I'm not too fussed about it, but some people complained they would have liked the games in English, and they are going to do a patch translation, which is great. One thing I will add, if they are going to do a patch translation, they should look at doing proper widescreen for Panorama Cotton. The reason I say this is some developers, and I actually saw this the other week, some fan developers had actually figured out you could actually widescreen the original game. What I saw was they had the display area, the actual shooting area in-game. The HUD was not widescreen, but the actual display area was, and for an update you could easily just add in some graphics just to make it look like the HUD's then added into widescreen. So that would be an interesting thing. You can actually do proper widescreen for Panoramic Cotton. There's been a fan patch that's done it, so that's definitely something I think ININ Strictly and Ratalaika games should look at doing, because that would make it really, really nice. Now, despite those issues, and I will say they are annoying, especially as I was a professional QA tester myself in the video games industry, it's still nice to actually have them. I'm really glad they have reissued them. Great to hear they will be releasing updated patches with English translations at some point, supposedly. And the reason I say supposedly is I'm actually still waiting on patches for Cotton Reboot, which is supposed to add in the character from the second Cotton game to it. And I'm also noting there isn't the ability to play the second arcade revision of G Darius HD currently on the collection. I know it was actually patched into the Japanese version, but I haven't been able to find it in the Western version yet. And I'm having suspicion the patch that should have updated it hasn't been released yet, so that's annoying. As a result, I'm a little bit in the mindset I'll wait and see until the English translation patch actually comes out. In fact, I'll add a comment to this video when the English patch is out. So if there isn't a comment, then they haven't done an English patch for either game. So I will let you know as soon as they release, if they release. Regardless of the fact if there is or isn't an English translation, these are still really solid games, and despite me complaining about a few issues, and justifiably, they are still worth getting if you're fans of Cotton and if you enjoy these type of shooter games. I mean, this is the first chance to get them outside of the original Japanese release, and these cost you a fraction of the price now. I mean, the Japanese SNES version is going to cost you around £80 to £100 at present. Panorama Cotton is going to set you back quite a few £100, and it's pretty hard to get hold of, and it's rather expensive. So it's nice to hear that Strictly Limited Games will be also doing new retail versions. In fact, you can pre-order them on their website as well, or you can buy these digital versions now from ININ Games. They are very fun and enjoyable shooters, and if you want a sort of Space Harrier one, go for Panorama Cotton. If you want a more traditional 2D arcade shooter, go for Cotton 100%. And if you just enjoy shooters in general, like myself, buy them both. It is a great opportunity to own them, and I'm really glad to see them re-released. I just wish they hadn't quite rushed the ports, just spent a bit more time to polish them up here and there. But other than that, I mean, they've got the usual things like save states, they've got the CRT filters that are in the other Ratalaika games, save states, and the rewind function, and they do both look really nice as well. But if you want to play the games in English, you may want to hold off a little bit until the patch comes out. And I said, as we've also covered, the Cotton reboot is available as well, and that's absolutely fantastic. That really is a good fun game. And they've also just announced they're doing a new Cotton game as well, so that's going to be really interesting to look at and play. I'm really excited for that as well. It's really nice to see the Cotton series getting a lot of love. I think the only game that I said hasn't been officially released of the shooter games, there are a few sort of quirky spin-off games, is it'd be nice if the original Cotton arcade game actually got a release. So that would be another one for strictly an in-game game to consider. So we've got the Cotton reboot, but not the original arcade game, which actually has some different stages and levels. And then finally there's also this new one, so I'm looking forward to that, and Cotton 2 and Cotton Boomerang as well are out now as well. So yep, this really is the year of Cotton, and I'm certainly looking forward to the new Cotton game as well. But yeah, I mean, Cotton overall is a very good series, and I do highly recommend all their games. And it's great to see success and Strictly Limited and in-game games re-releasing them this year. It really has been the year of Cotton. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of this review. Thank you for watching this randomised gaming video, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Random Gamer Riven, the editor of Randomised Gaming. And if you enjoyed this randomised gaming video, can I kindly ask you hit the like button? And if you enjoy our content and want regular weekly videos, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you have any questions or comments related to this video, please do leave a comment below in the description, and myself or one of the team will try and get back to you at some point. And if you want to watch something else, we have a huge array of videos and playlists already on the channel, so do check us out and do look at our content, as the channel is packed full of playthrough videos, long play videos, gameplay videos of both obscure and well-known games, retro and modern consoles. We have tech analysis videos made up of gaming comparisons between different versions, and we also do comparisons on 50-60 Hz issues between PAL and NTSC. We have some consumer issues that may affect you as a gamer as well. We have reviews and so much more on the channel. So if you like our content, please do consider sticking around and looking at our channel. And I also do regular streams as well, so I hope to see you drop by on one of them as well. So all that leaves me to do is thank you, the viewer, for watching this video, and I wish you a good night, a good evening, a good afternoon, or a good morning wherever you are in the world watching this video, and I hope to see you on the next one.